A billion-dollar company was seconds away from collapse. Top engineers failed. World-class experts gave up. But then, someone no one ever noticed, a single mom janitor, stepped forward and did the impossible. In just seconds, she saw the $500 million problem. And what the CEO did next left the entire world speechless. It was a disaster, a $500 million disaster. That's how the CEO of Bright Tech Innovations, one of the largest and most influential tech companies in America, described the nightmare unfolding before his eyes. The company had spent not just months, but years of sleepless nights, endless testing, and countless sacrifices, working on one project that was supposed to secure its place at the top of the technology world. Nearly $500 million had already been poured into it. This wasn't just another product. It was their crown jewel, the one invention that would change the entire landscape of artificial intelligence. Investors were buzzing with excitement. Customers were eagerly waiting, and the media had already begun calling it the future of AI. The entire future of the company rested on this one launch. But when the big day finally came, everything fell apart in a matter of seconds. The system didn't just slow down, it completely crashed. Screens went black, servers froze, and panic spread like wildfire across the entire building. The excitement that had filled the air only moments earlier turned into chaos, confusion, and fear. Every single expert in the building was summoned immediately. The best engineers, world-class programmers, and even external consultants, charging thousands of dollars per hour, rushed into the control room. Teams worked frantically, typing furiously, running diagnostics, rebooting servers, and trying every trick in the book. Yet nothing worked. The software that had taken years to develop and cost hundreds of millions to create remained broken. With every minute that ticked by, the company bled money. Millions of dollars were being lost, not only in immediate failure, but also in trust. Investors who had once spoken confidently about Bright Tech were now making furious phone calls, demanding answers. Customers began flooding social media with questions and doubts. The employees, too, felt the weight of doom pressing down on them. Many whispered in fear that this failure could mean mass layoffs, lost careers, and the downfall of a company they had dedicated their lives to building. The CEO stood at the center of it all, his hands pressed against his forehead, his mind racing. He could see the empire he had built crumbling in front of him. He had never felt more powerless. He even began to consider the unthinkable, shutting the entire project down completely. But then, just as hope seemed to vanish, help came from the most unexpected place in the entire building. Her name was Maria Lopez. She was a single mom, a woman who had been dealt some of the hardest cards in life, yet refused to give up. Every single day, Maria woke up before dawn, packed breakfast for her two young children, dropped them off at school, and then hurried to her first job at the local school cafeteria. She served food with a tired but warm smile, making sure children had enough to eat, even if it meant skipping her own meals. By late afternoon, when most people went home to rest, Maria's day was only halfway done. She would head straight to her second job, working the night shift at Bright Tech Innovations as a janitor. Dressed in her simple uniform, pushing her cleaning cart, she would quietly move through the glittering offices where high-paid employees discussed million-dollar deals and cutting-edge technologies. To them, Maria was invisible. She was just the janitor, the woman with the mop who emptied their trash cans, wiped their desks, and polished their floors. Few people ever learned her name. Some barely looked at her when she passed. And yet, behind those quiet eyes and tired hands was a mind sharper than most of the people working in that building. Because Maria had a secret past, one she rarely spoke about. Years earlier, before her world had turned upside down, Maria had been a computer science student. She was passionate, curious, and ambitious. She loved staying up late solving puzzles, breaking down codes, and building small programs for fun. She dreamed of one day working in a big tech company, creating innovations that could change the world. But then life struck hard. Her husband walked out, leaving her alone with two children to raise. With bills piling up and mouths to feed, Maria had no choice but to drop out of college. Her dreams of becoming an engineer were shoved aside as she worked whatever job she could find, waitressing, cleaning, cooking, just to survive. And yet, her love for technology never truly died. In the quiet hours after work, while her kids slept, Maria would sometimes borrow old library books about programming or read online articles about the latest advancements in software. She kept her mind sharp, even if no one knew it. So, on that chaotic night at Bright Tech, as she moved her car down the hallway and overheard the engineers panicking about a system failure worth $500 million, something inside her stirred. She paused, listened carefully, and felt a strange pull. This was her world, the one she once dreamed of being part of. Her heart pounded. She hesitated, torn between staying silent, as she always did, or stepping forward. Then she took a deep breath. Something inside her whispered, "Say something. This is your moment." And for the first time in years, Maria spoke up. At first, nobody paid attention to Maria. She stood there, clutching her mop handle like a shield, her voice soft but steady as she tried to speak over the chaos in the room. The engineers were too busy arguing, typing furiously, and running test after test to notice her. To them, she was just the janitor, someone who cleaned up after them, not someone who could possibly contribute to a crisis that had left the world's best minds stumped. "Ma'am, this is a serious issue," one engineer said sharply, barely glancing at her. His tone carried both stress and dismissal. "We need experts here." Maria could have backed down. She could have quietly walked away, telling herself it wasn't her place. But something inside her refused to let go. She had seen enough, listened enough, and understood enough to recognize what might be wrong. So, she took a breath, steadied her nerves, and said clearly, "I think I know what's wrong. You're looking at the code the wrong way." The room froze. For a few seconds, you could hear nothing but the faint hum of the servers. Everyone stared at her in disbelief. Some exchanged skeptical glances, while others looked almost offended, as if the idea that a janitor could understand the problem was an insult. But the CEO, who had been pacing the room with frustration written all over his face, finally stopped. His shoulders slumped, and his voice was heavy with desperation as he said, "Let her try. At this point, we have nothing to lose." Maria's heart pounded in her chest. Her legs felt weak as she walked up to the massive screen filled with endless lines of complex code. Rows and rows of symbols, numbers, and commands glowed in front of her like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Her hands trembled, not because she doubted her knowledge, but because of the weight of the moment. Dozens of highly paid engineers were watching her every move. The CEO's reputation was hanging by a thread, and in the back of her mind, she thought of her children, how this moment might change their lives forever. She leaned closer, her eyes scanning the code with practiced focus. Years of late-night reading, quiet study, and her natural love for problem-solving suddenly came alive. And then she saw it. It wasn't a catastrophic breakdown. It wasn't some impossible error that required millions more to fix. It was something so small, so simple, that everyone else had overlooked it. A single misplaced line of code. Maria's fingers hovered over the keyboard. With calm precision, she corrected the error, hit enter, and held her breath. Suddenly, the dead system flickered back to life. Lines of code began to flow smoothly. The frozen screens lit up. The software rebooted, running flawlessly, exactly as it was meant to. For a moment, silence filled the room. Nobody moved. Then, like a wave, the realization hit. The room erupted. Engineers jumped from their chairs, shouting in disbelief and joy. Some clapped, others hugged each other, and a few even wiped tears from their eyes. A crisis that had nearly destroyed the company had been solved. Not by the experts, not by the consultants, but by the janitor they had ignored for years. The CEO, frozen in place, stared at Maria as though he had just witnessed a miracle. His billion-dollar problem was gone, and standing at the center of it all was the woman no one had ever truly noticed. Maria Lopez, the janitor, had just solved a $500 million problem in seconds. The next morning, the story spread like wildfire across the entire company. Bright Tech had been saved, and everyone wanted to know the same thing. Who was this woman? Employees whispered in hallways. Gossip flew in the cafeteria, and emails buzzed back and forth. Some couldn't believe it was true. A janitor had solved the most expensive and dangerous problem in the company's history. Others felt humbled, even ashamed, for the way they had overlooked her night after night as she quietly worked around them. Maria, however, tried to keep her head down. She showed up that morning in her uniform as usual, pushing her cart down the gleaming halls, unsure of what to expect. She wondered if people were laughing behind her back, or if management might even scold her for stepping outside her role. After all, in her experience, speaking up rarely brought good outcomes. So when her supervisor approached her and said, "The CEO wants to see you," Maria's heart sank. She immediately thought the worst. Maybe she had overstepped her boundaries. Maybe the engineers felt insulted, and now she would lose her job altogether. She walked nervously toward the CEO's office, her palms sweating, her legs heavy with dread. But the moment she stepped inside, everything changed. The CEO didn't sit behind his desk with a stern face. Instead, he stood up, walked over to her, and extended his hand with a smile full of gratitude. His words caught her completely off guard. "Maria, from today, you're no longer our janitor. You are our newest engineer." For a second, Maria thought she had misheard him. She blinked, her mouth opening but no words coming out. Tears welled up in her eyes as the reality sank in. Years of sacrifice, years of hiding her talent, years of silently wishing for another chance. All of it had led to this moment. But the CEO wasn't finished. He went on to explain that Bright Tech would fully sponsor her education so she could complete the degree she once had to abandon. On top of that, they were offering her a six-figure salary, more money than she had ever dreamed of earning. It meant she could pay off debts, give her children the life they deserved, and finally breathe without the crushing weight of financial struggle. In just a single day, Maria's world had transformed. From being invisible in the shadows with a mop in her hand, she was now standing in the spotlight, recognized for her brilliance. For the first time in years, she felt not just seen, but truly valued. Her life had changed forever. News outlets picked up the story within hours. By the next morning, it was everywhere, on television screens, on the front pages of newspapers, and trending across every major social media platform. Headlines read things like "Single Mom Janitor Saves Tech Giant" and "The Woman Who Fixed a $500 million Mistake in Minutes." Millions of people, from students to CEOs, shared her story online. Strangers left comments about how Maria gave them hope, reminding them that no matter how invisible they felt, their potential still mattered. In a world that often measured people by their degrees, salaries, or job titles, Maria had shattered the stereotype. She proved that intelligence, creativity, and brilliance don't always come wrapped in expensive suits or fancy office chairs. Sometimes they're hidden in the hands of someone quietly working in the background, unseen and unappreciated. When reporters finally asked Maria how it felt to be called a hero, she shook her head humbly and gave the world an answer they would never forget. "I didn't do this to be a hero. I just wanted to help." Never underestimate people based on their job title. Talent can come from anywhere. Her words struck deep. They were simple, yet they carried more power than any press release. People around the globe began to reflect. How many Mariahs had they ignored in their own lives? How many janitors, cashiers, drivers, or servers might be hiding untapped brilliance, overlooked because of the uniform they wore? Her story became more than just a news piece. It became a movement. Schools began sharing her journey to inspire students. Companies used her example to teach their employees about humility, respect, and open-mindedness. Parents told their children that greatness isn't about titles. It's about passion, persistence, and seizing the right moment. As for Bright Tech, the once-doomed software project didn't just recover, it thrived. With the bug fixed, the product launched successfully and earned billions of dollars in revenue. Investors celebrated, customers lined up, and the company became a leader in artificial intelligence. But whenever the CEO was asked what turned the company's fortune around, he never credited the engineers, the consultants, or even himself. Instead, he always gave the same answer, spoken with pride and humility. It wasn't the engineers. It wasn't me. It was the janitor who reminded us that true brilliance has no labels. Maria's story became a legend, not just about saving a company, but about reminding the world that genius can come from anywhere. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful video. Thanks for watching.